The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
Hi, welcome back to the Real Stuff podcast. Hadley Vlahos is a hospice nurse. You can find her on TikTok at Nurse Hadley or on Instagram also. On the note of interesting jobs and, going down the path we've talked about going with this podcast where we talk to people that have fascinating careers, Hadley is prime time for this format. And all across her social media platforms, she shares some of the most fascinating niche content about her job as a hospice nurse doing end-of-life care and the takeaways that she's had, what she's learned along the way, and what it's really like to spend time with people as they are in their dying moments. She actually has a New York Times bestselling book. It's called The In-Between: Unforgettable Encounters During Life's Final Moments. An incredible book to have at such a young age. She really has been exposed to death more than the average person, and she has a lot of things to share that I think can be really comforting for a lot of people, especially those who are going through hard times with health-related things and their family members. Today's conversation is so wide-reaching because we really do discuss all things hospice, death. It gets really deep, very emotional regarding the afterlife, the whole concept of death, and some really serious topics. But then we also get into a lot of personal stuff. And I guess I will use the word drama. If you've been following Hadley on social media or even just searching her name up in the TikTok search bar, you will know there's a lot of drama going on in this woman's life at the moment. Stuff with her ex-husband, her divorce, her current boyfriend, another girl who is claiming that her current boyfriend is the father of her child. So much gossip. It's just a classic TikTok spiral story. I have to be honest, I did not know how comfortable she would be diving into that drama, even though she has opened up a little bit about it on her social media. She's been posting less and less frequently, and she shared a little bit about it, but I didn't want to offend her or upset her by asking her questions about the TikTok drama, especially when she's promoting a book that's such a meaningful, deep topic, and she also just makes content that's so meaningful and incredible. I personally didn't want to focus this interview on the drama, so you will hear that I'm kind of tiptoeing around the questions. Like, I'm really not trying to force her to give us the tea, but this girl, on her own free will, gave us the tea. She opened up and delivered. So if you're here for the gossip, you're going to get it. You will not be disappointed. This conversation is very well-rounded. A major thank you to Hadley for coming on and sharing with us. I highly recommend you guys follow her, definitely on TikTok. She makes some amazing skits and sketches where she's kind of playing the characters, showcasing amazing learnings and theories and takeaways that she's had from being with people as they're dying. It is just fascinating. And I'm personally going to get her book because I'm very interested in that too. And I will link it in the show notes if you want to read it as well. So now let's dive in to today's interview with Nurse Hadley. It's come to my attention that you don't even know how I found you and how this whole thing came about. Let me just share this story because maybe someone else could be spared in the process. But there is this scam ring going around right now with podcasts where people are sending emails to creators and pretending to be from a podcast. They're offering to pay them a fee to come as a guest on the show. And then the moment that creator says, yes, I will come on your show, they share their screen with this scammer, and the scammer logs into their Facebook Live and steals access and removes them from their Facebook channels. And it's running rampant. Unfortunately, a few people have fallen victim to this. But apparently what happened is this scammer, who calls himself Blake, found you and reached out to you and asked you to come be on the Real Stuff podcast. But it was a scam, and it went to your manager. Your manager was smart enough to forward that to my actual email address, which you can find all over my social medias, and ask, is this real? Because Hadley would love to be a guest, but we just want to make sure this is real. And we looked at it and we said, oh, this is one of those scam emails, but we would love to bring this woman on our podcast. And, I actually had never come across your content. You were nowhere in my algorithm. Basically, you were a guest that was sourced to me by a scammer. So we have Blake to thank.
Thank you to them.
Thank you, Blake. You're doing great work out there. Keep on going. But if anyone's listening, don't fall victim to those scams, and please always check that it's real before you share your screen with them. Anyway, thank you, Blake, for finding Hadley. I'm sure everyone and their mother and their grandmother would find your career so fascinating. It's just unlike anything I've ever really heard. So for people who don't know you, don't follow you, can you just give a little bit of background about what you do, how you got into it, and what is going on in your work life?
Yeah, so I'm a hospice nurse, which is so funny to me that people do find it interesting because for many years, every time I say, oh, I'm a hospice nurse, people are like, oh, okay, that's really sad. And they change the subject. But basically, what I do is I go to people's homes, wherever they are, and I am a registered nurse. And these are people who have decided to not do any more, it's called life saving interventions. So, like chemotherapy, surgery, going to the ER, and they have 6 months or less to live. So I go into their home, and my goal is to care for them and to care for their family and to make them as comfortable as possible until they die. And I love it. And it's been a dream of mine. I've been a hospice nurse for 9 years now.
When you were young, were you around death a lot?
So my grandparents own a funeral home. So I
Okay.
death is very normal to me. We would talk about it around the dinner table like it was just very normal thing. But I did not go into nursing wanting to be a hospice nurse. I actually wanted to be a labor and delivery nurse, the other side, and I didn't get the job. And I thought my life was over, but here we are now.
Wow. Okay. So growing up around death so much and it being just sort of talked about naturally, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a young child who's, just starting to understand the world and how it works and where people are when our parents start telling us they're in our hearts now or they're not here. But if it is talked about so casually as it is in a lot of cultures around the world, I would assume that really does shape your perception of it. Did you ever go through your own personal reckoning with death? Did it ever scare you, or was it always just extremely normal?
Well, growing up, I think it was very understood to me that this was something that happened at the end of life because they did still shield me from like child death. And I would only see like, the 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds. So to me, it was like you go to school or you go to college or you start a career. This is just, and then you get old and you die. But then whenever I was a sophomore in high school, I actually had a friend die. His name was Taylor Haugen at our little small town in Florida called Niceville, Florida. Actually, it's a real place. We were at a football game. We were sophomores, and he got put in the game, and we were all so excited because it's very rare as a sophomore to have a friend get to play in the game. And never forget, I mean, our whole town was there because that's how high school football games are in small towns in the South. And he went up to catch the football, and two players from the opposing team hit him from the other side, and he died instantly on the football field in front of all of us. And that for me, I just had so many questions of, why would that happen and how he had so much life ahead of him, and really just started having a really hard time understanding death from that point forward.
Yeah, wow. I'm really sorry that you had to witness that. That sounds traumatic. How does because my understanding from your social media is that you have had to be a hospice nurse for children.
I take care of people who are normally 18 and up, but we do have pediatric patients at our company. So they're not ever like assigned to me, but I do visits and have to see pediatric patients, and we discuss them in meetings. So I know what's going on as well.
So tell me about what you actually do.
My company hires me, and Medicare, which is for people 65 and older, provides most of the money that then pays the nurses and all of us. And so whenever you sign up for hospice, Medicare will pay us, and we go to people's homes. I usually see about 5 patients in a day. And whenever I go in, I'm asking how they're doing, what's been going on with patients. I take their vital signs. I'll look at their medications. I'll order more medications for them. I'll call the doctor. I'll do wound care. It's really anything that you would see in a hospital. We just do it in the home, like with a cat on my lap. I love it.
I feel like most people who are around a scenario where there is a dying person or even just a super elderly person who's not well and is in bed on bed rest, going to see them is such a sad part of the day and brings up so many emotions. Obviously, it's their family member, but you going into work every day, you showing up every day and going to do that Do you feel that same layer of darkness about it or of sadness around it?
I think that there's actually a lot of happy times in hospice care, and there's definitely a lot of humor from a lot of patients. And I think that when a lot of people think of hospice, they think of death or or the day someone dies. And the reality is that usually I'll see people 2 or 3 times a week whenever I'm their main nurse. And if I have them for 6 months, that means that I'm seeing them, a lot every month for 6 months. And then the day that they die that's just one day out of that. And that's just such a small part of what I'm actually doing. I always say that I feel like there's so much life in end of life care.
You've talked so much about some amazing lessons and takeaways and things that you've learned. As someone who's around people at such a pivotal time, I don't know, their whole life has got to be flashing before their eyes, and they're probably just trying to impart and pass on. Biologically, their body's probably just like, share as much as I can with this young woman who's right in front of me and tell her everything I've learned. What are some lessons you've learned? What are some major takeaways or things that have actually changed you as a person?
Yeah, it's very interesting. They say that people go through what's called a life review at the end. As you know that you're on hospice and you're going to die, you just start to think back on your life and you start to think about, do I have any regrets? Do I not have any regrets? One that really stuck out to me that I've been thinking about a lot lately was this patient I had who was doing that. He had said that he had thought a lot about if he had had regrets, and that he had gone back and forth and he thought about all of the things in his life that he should have regretted. Like, for example, he said that whenever he was like in his 20s, he lost his job because he was smoking weed. And then he said, but you know what? I don't regret that, because if I hadn't lost that job, I would have never been in a grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon. And that's where I met my wife.
Mm.
And then he was like, and then there was this time that I was like late to a job because I had spilled coffee on my pants and I had to turn around. And he said, that's actually whenever I saw this like little dog on the side of the road. And when my wife died unexpectedly, that dog became the reason that I even kept living. It's just all these things. So he's like, all of these things that you think back on that you're like at the time, like, oh, I'm going to regret that later. They led me to where I am and to how I am now. Like, all of those things had to happen. And he said, I think I lived a good life. And I love that so much.
Can you talk about the theory? I think one of your patients imparted it on you about the party room.
Oh yeah, she did. She was a much older woman. I love her party room. And it's because she used to joke about being like ready to die. She's like, "Oh, I can't wait to die." And you can kind of like laugh about it a few times, and then as a nurse you start going, do I need to be like concerned? Like, are you a little bit too ready to die? Are you going to do something? And am I going to get in trouble if you do? And I just am like, oh yeah, she did that. Well, she's been saying that she wanted to die for like a month now. So I started to be like, okay, so like let's talk about that. What do you mean when you say you're ready to die? Because now I'm a little bit worried. And she was like, okay. She's like, well, when you get to my age, she said, you start to think of life as this like party room. And she said that whenever you're born, that's your earth room, and you're born and you have your parents and your grandparents, and then you start going through life and you just add more people to your room, your life room. And then you get a dog and you get some siblings and some cousins, and then you keep going through life and you get some best friends, and then you get maybe a spouse, and then you start having kids, and then you start having grandkids. And like, this earth room is just, it's really full. It's like a party. And she said, and then all throughout life, some of these people start exiting your earth room because they die, like your grandparents, and they go into this, say, this afterlife room. And she said, so as you go through life, you lose people in this earth room, like your parents, your grandparents, maybe your dogs die. And she said, eventually you get to my age, and although you love your kids and your grandkids and you want to be with them on earth, but you start looking at that afterlife room with, now that has your parents and your grandparents and your friends and maybe your spouse. And you're like, oh, wow, that looks like a party. And so you kind of get really excited to get to see all of those people again.
It does make you realize why a young child would have such a dark fear about dying because they literally don't know anyone that is on the other side. Whereas, even speaking from personal experience, I was always so afraid of death as a child. And I didn't know anyone who passed away until a very close family friend who I called my uncle. He wasn't a real uncle, but we called him our uncle. He passed away when I was in high school. And I fully feel a shift of how scared I feel to die, just knowing that someone that I actually know and knew and loved has done that before me and is wherever he is. It's almost like a comforting guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another lesson I heard you share, I think it was when you were on the Kelly Clarkson show, was from a patient who told you to eat the cake. Can you tell this
Yes.
story?
Yes, that one's in my book too. That was such a pivotal moment in my life. That was at a time in my life when I was a newer hospice nurse and I had an eating disorder. And either people knew and they didn't say anything, but people never really said much to me about it. And this patient, she was definitely younger for hospice, like in her 40s. It's like she could see right through me. It was really crazy, but she didn't really have anyone there at the end. She had a sister who lived down the street who was like her caretaker, but she was mostly alone. She didn't talk to most of her family. And I guess she went through her own life review. And I remember sitting there one day and she told me, I've been thinking a lot and I see a lot of you in me. And I feel like I need to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. And she said, I feel like I spent so much of my life just really being concerned about my weight. And when I look back on that now, what I'm seeing is that I missed days at the beach with my friends because I cared about how my stomach looked. So I didn't go. And there would be birthday dinners that I didn't attend because I was counting calories and I didn't want to have to eat the cake and have people question me. And she said, I really just wish looking back that I would have just eaten the cake, literally and figuratively, and really enjoyed my life instead of really obsessing over my weight and missing out on so many of these opportunities that, yes, like food is surrounded by, our body image is surrounded by, but there's so much happiness in those moments.
That's amazing. Are there any other major lessons that you've taken from any of your patients that you actually feel like changes the way you approach your day-to-day life?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. There's a more recent one that, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm going through a divorce. And there's this patient I took care of not too long ago who kind of came to me randomly, but him and his wife owned a bunch of restaurants down here. And I live in the South near the water. And he was a chef. And they kept getting knocked down by hurricanes, these restaurants did. And I made kind of like a joking comment of like, well, why did you keep building on the water? Like if you kept having these restaurants being blown away. And I used the words, I said, why did you keep starting over? And he said to me, he said, well, wait, let me clear the air on this, Hadley. You actually never start over in life. You always start from experience. So you're never ever starting over. And for me, that's been really helpful in reframing, how I move forward in life with my divorce. And like, it's very frustrating to feel like, oh, I built all of this for so many years and now I'm starting over again. And having that reframe of I'm not starting over, I'm starting from experience has really helped me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reframe. Speaking of your divorce, I want to get into a little bit about your personal life because you do have such a fascinating story with the social media and the book and the future TV show. But before we go there, just back to this job, it is such a pivotal moment for the person who's dying, but also the family around them. That's a moment that is ingrained in their mind. They will never forget. Similar, speaking of labor and delivery nurse, similar to a birthing person who I could speak from experience, is absorbing all of the visuals and locking it into their DNA of what's happening in this moment. Emotions are so heightened, adrenaline is so high, and their body is creating a core memory. But for the nurse who's in the room or for the labor and delivery nurse who does this every day routinely, they probably might not even remember that patient in a year because they've seen so many in a day. How do you view your patients in terms of when it is these pivotal moments and you know you're with someone at such a key moment for them, but for you it's just another Tuesday at work and then you're going home to your family? Do you feel those heightened sensations every time someone dies in your care?
I think it's interesting. Something that I feel like we don't talk about as a society enough is that most people who have a loved one on hospice have what's called anticipatory grief. And you kind of grieve the loss of this person before they actually die. So you could say, if it was your dad on hospice, you would probably grieve whenever you saw your dad, who maybe you saw as like this strong figure your entire life, whenever he became bedbound. You start grieving a little bit that the dad who I saw chop down wood or lift my grandkids up on his shoulders will now never do that. And so maybe a few months before he actually dies, you start to grieve that a little bit. As you see someone, maybe sometimes people are a little bit confused at the end and they aren't remembering the same memories that you remember. You start to grieve that person a little bit too. And so sometimes in hospice, there's almost this slow letting go. There are times where people will actually feel relief when someone dies. And sometimes that is because they have watched someone that they love suffer, and all of a sudden they see that they are at peace. And then I see that they almost feel this guilt over feeling relieved. And there's usually tears whenever I do death visits, but it's definitely more common than I would think it would be for people to also laugh around and joke or almost have like a little mini family reunion and remember happy times. And it's not always as sad as many people I think would think it is.
Wow, it's interesting all the range of emotions
Yeah.
that you get in there. For someone who's listening who is just so terrified of death, whether it's for themselves or a loved one, do you have any reassuring words?
Personally, I do believe in an afterlife because of what I've witnessed. I came from the ER as an intern a couple of years before I started working in hospice, and seeing what I consider to be like the true horrors of the world in the ER made me stop believing in an afterlife or just kind of like a higher being. And being able to see people have all of these same experiences where they have like deceased loved ones come to get them, no matter what that person believes. It doesn't matter what religion they are, what background, they all experience the same things. And so I do personally believe that our loved ones do come get us at the end. But also, even if that's just, our brain doing whatever it's doing at the end, I would say most of the time, very, very, very often, people are always at peace. They feel like their loved ones are coming to get them, and they feel ready and happy to go to whatever's next. And as someone who's probably witnessed probably 1,000 people die now, I would say I'm not scared of being in that position.
I've heard you say our bodies know how to die.
They do.
What do you mean by that?
They do. They know how to die just like we know how to go in childbirth, in my opinion. We naturally stop eating. That is a very normal part of dying. Normally, people a couple of days beforehand will go into a coma, or they start sleeping more before that. So, what I consider to be like in between whatever comes next in this world. And so, they go from sleeping like us, like 8 hours a day, to 10 hours a day. And then you're 12 hours a day. And then eventually you're just sleeping 24/7, which is what we consider to be like in a coma. It's always, in my opinion, very peaceful whenever people take their last breath. But our bodies do know how to shut down.
You just kind of mentioned this, but is it really a very, very common thing that you hear people who are just about to die seeing deceased loved ones?
Yeah, it's super common. It's common enough that I can call our doctor and nothing can change with the patient otherwise. Their vital signs can be the same. They could not be taking a new medication, nothing. And they'll mention to me that, say, their deceased sister came and saw them. And our doctors take it seriously enough to say, okay, let's increase your nurse visits because they might die soon.
What percentage of your patients would you say report seeing something like that?
So I'd say about 30% of my patients have Alzheimer's or dementia at the end, so they wouldn't be able to tell me no matter what. So for the other, say 60 to 70% of patients, I'd say 50% tell me or tell a loved one, and then either the other 50% either don't say anything because they fear that someone would think that they are getting confused or going crazy, or they don't see them. They don't say anything to me or a loved one. But 50% do.
You now believe in an afterlife. Can you share that story about what really caused you to believe in that?
Yeah, she's in my book too. Yeah, so I call her Miss Sue in my book, and we were very, very, very close. And she was much older, and she was one of those ones too. Is like, I'm ready to die. She was extremely religious, and she had what's called COPD. So it's usually from smoking. Your entire life is normally how you get COPD. So at the end of your life, you're usually on oxygen, and you have a lot of trouble breathing, and you'll have these things called COPD exacerbations. And the best way I can describe it is like being like a fish out of water. Like you feel like you just cannot breathe at all. She had one of these COPD exacerbations, like an incident. And whenever I was able to get it under control with medication and oxygen, she told me I actually thought that was like I was going to die. And I've never questioned my faith my entire life. But in that moment, I actually thought that everything was about to go black and nothing was going to happen to me. And it really scared me. And I was like, wow, okay, makes sense to me. Then a few nights later, it happened again. And I asked her if she was scared because in my mind, I'm like, if you're also scared, I'll give you anxiety medication as well. And she said, no, I'm not scared. My husband's right behind you. And he had been dead for a very long time. And I was like, oh, really? And just from my experience, I knew that it actually was close that she was going to die. And she said, yeah, like I'm really excited to be with him. I'm excited to go see him. And I was like, okay. So I tell her son that it's going to be soon, that I think that she might die soon. And I did feel like it was going to be that night. Oh, because she had said, my husband said, we're going tonight. And so I was like, had seen that enough that when people say when they're going, they're always right. And since we were super close, I told all of my coworkers, I'm not on call tonight, but call me if it's about her, just so that I can be there for her. And I had driven home that day and been like really emotional and really didn't want her to die. And had the thought to myself, like, you are a terrible hospice nurse if you do not want your patients to die. And so I was like, okay. So, like, I told everyone, like, I am on call for her if you get a call. And so I did. I woke up the night and I thought that something seemed off, like maybe she had died. Woke up the next morning though, and I had never gotten a single call. So I just got ready for the day, was planning on going to see her. And whenever it hit 8 a.m., whenever I started work, I called her son to see how she was doing. And he said, well, she died last night. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I told all of my coworkers that they needed to call me. I wanted to be there for y'all for that. And I'm so sorry. Like there must have been a miscommunication. And he stopped me and he said, no, I told them not to call you because my dad told my mom to not call you because you couldn't handle it, which was a thought that I had never expressed to anyone out loud. But this was one of my first patients that I was like incredibly close to. And for that moment, I was just like, that is crazy because I didn't tell a single soul that I was really dreading going to the death visit, but I was going to do it so that I could be there for them.
Wow. As someone who's so comfortable talking about death and has been around it for your whole life, how would you feel end of life care or even death for a loved one of yours would differ from what you do with strangers?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. Also, in my book is my former mother in law, because of course I'm going through a divorce, but she had brain cancer. And so I did also help to care for her. She did go on hospice. I mean, in my opinion, that is my job as the daughter in law and the hospice nurse to make sure that she has the most peaceful passing ever. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I think that she would want to be at her home and she would want the windows open so she could listen to the ocean, and she would want this candle and this sound. And I had it all planned out in my mind. And she had never really expressed that she wanted to be at her home, but she had never also explicitly said, like, take me to the hospital or I want to be in a different facility or anything like that. But I think that she was almost just trying to kind of please me. And basically, what happened at the end was that there was a hurricane and we had to evacuate. I think the trip really took it out of her. And whenever we came back from evacuating, I had accidentally left the medication, her pain medication, in the fridge at the place we had evacuated to. So we actually had to take her to the ER, and she actually died in the ER. And for me, that was very difficult. I felt like I kind of failed as a daughter in law. But the thing is that if we had not gone to that hospital, her son, my ex husband, would not have been able to be there. He actually was working at the facility next door. And I called him and said, "We're coming over here." If she had not been there, he would have missed her dying. So I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And I look back on that experience now and I'm like, well, it happened that way. And I think it matters way, way, way more to her that her son was there than for her to have a candle and be listening to the ocean.
Yeah, wow. Let's go back a little because for people who don't follow you on social media, you have now over 2 million TikTok followers. When did this turn into a social media following for you? When did you start sharing?
Yeah, I actually started with COVID, so 5 years ago. I was trying to make a video for only my family and friends about my kids having to go stay with my parents for a couple of months during COVID. It ended up only being 1 month, but at the time, we didn't know what COVID was going to be at all. And we were told that we had no PPE and just to grab a scarf and come on in. And I had a 3-month-old baby at home. And so my mom had to come. So I wanted to make a video of that for my own like friends and family. I searched the App Store for video editing and TikTok is what popped up. I'd never heard of it. And TikTok was nothing like it is now back then. And still, I think still to this day, the only way to save the video that you've edited is to post it. And I thought it was kind of like those other apps where you post it like Flickr or whatever, where it doesn't go anywhere. It just is your own little thing. And that's what I thought. And so I did that and I uploaded it to my personal pages. And I remember picking up my phone and having like a million notifications. The video, I think, got 2 million views in the first 24 hours. And I was like, whoa, and freaked me out because I'd never been perceived by that many people before. And I went to actually just delete the video. But I started reading the comments first. And it was really interesting to see other parents being able to relate and other healthcare workers being able to relate. And for what I feel like was the first time I got to see that social media can be more than just like fashion inspiration and makeup tips, because that's all I ever used it for. You really could build a community based off something that's really different. But I had said in the video that I was a nurse and I didn't share what kind. And so a bunch of the comments started asking me, what kind of nurse are you? And I'd been kind of conditioned that people don't like to hear about hospice. They don't like to hear about death from my own experiences. And so I was like, okay, well, that was fun while it lasted. But I got to tell people what kind of nurse I am. And so I made a video saying something along the lines of, I've been a hospice nurse for this long, and I think I have some really cool stories. Does anyone want to hear them? And people were really receptive to it. And they were like, yeah. So I just started sharing my stories. And from that came a book deal and all of this other stuff as well.
What was that doing to you mentally as you were, this small town nurse who just posted on this random app? By the way, TikTok is the best place for these niche areas to blow up. But now all of a sudden you have all these eyes on you. How were you doing mentally during that time?
Yeah, it actually, I don't think honestly ever really hit me until I went on my book tour last year. For whatever reason, I think it's really easy to see numbers as numbers and not as people. And I was definitely connecting with people and getting all of these messages from people. And like, it's not that I didn't know they were real people, but it wasn't until I went on my book tour and there were like a 4-hour book signing lines and I was meeting these people and they're like, you helped me. And I got to, me and my sister read your book together. It helped us come to terms with her dying before she died. And we watched her TikToks and I'm like, it was then that I was like, whoa, like these are all like actual people. And I honestly, if I'm being honest, I don't think I've ever told anyone this. It landed me in therapy because it freaked me out a little bit.
Because you're like, it's easy to look at these people as numbers, but when you realize they're real people, it's like, okay, I got to listen to every word I say because people
Yeah.
are listening and changing their lives based on my input.
Yeah, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. Just the amount of people who were like, "Wow, you changed my life, you did that," and just my own self-image of like, I don't think that I'm that great. I don't think that I'm that awesome, and like, what if these people found out that I'm not as great as they think I am? Are they going to hate me? Kind of thing, and it kind of freaked me out.
During this time, are you making money off of social media?
I don't think I started making money off of social media until maybe the last 3 years. I think the first 2 years I didn't make any money off social media.
And in the last 3 years, has it been mainly through like the creator funds where you're making money from views, or is it from brand partnerships?
Yeah, I take very, very few brand partnerships. I think I can count on one or two hands how many brand partnerships I've done over the entire 5 years. I'm just very picky with it. And I think I watched a podcast one time that said, give, probably from Gary Vee, it was like, give freely, with no expectations of people. And then whenever you do ask people to show up, they will. And so I was like, I'm not going to do any brand partnerships, and I just gave freely and gave out, all of my knowledge and tried to help people. But then whenever my book came out, I was like, I need y'all, and people did show up. They really did.
Was this around the time when NBC was optioning out your show?
Yes.
And was that your idea? You wanted to turn it into a TV series, or someone came to you?
There was actually an auction for it with multiple different studios. So my book released, and then it was the surprise New York Times bestseller, released at number 3 on the list, and I think everyone was pretty shocked by it. So right after that, the New York Times flew me out to do an interview for the talk column. And a lot of people saw that, and that's whenever my agent started getting contacted about possibly turning my book into a TV show. And I got to meet a lot of really cool people over Zoom, but this was also during the writer's strike. So there were only certain people that I could not talk to, so that we didn't break the strike.
And speaking of that New York Times interview, I believe that was the day that, for lack of a better phrase, your marriage fell apart.
Yeah, it was like the day before.
Day before that.
Yeah,
exactly.
It was a lot all at once.
So you're in this marriage for what, almost 8 years at this point?
We were together for that long. We were married for, I think, 5.
Okay. And so your previous partner, who you have children with,
2.
you're building your career alongside this marriage. How comfortable are you talking about your previous marriage?
Somewhat. I do, of course, have legal proceedings that I want to protect. But, there's definitely some things that I'm willing to talk about, and I'm still kind of working through in therapy on my own, and definitely want to accept my own part in things, but also kind of heal for things that weren't my own fault.
I'm less interested in the gossip and the drama and, what happened. What did he say to you on the call? I'm not going to ask you those questions. I'm more so kind of fascinated by how I've seen this pattern now of women being successful in their careers, and their careers like just about to take off and they're getting all the opportunities, and then the marriage falls apart. Do you feel there was any element of your success and what was happening with you that was all wrapped up in what ended up happening?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I try not to blame him too much for it. And I don't really know if there is anyone to blame, but when we met, it was such a different dynamic. I mean, he's a doctor of physical therapy. We met at work, working at a nursing home together. And, he was the doctor and I was the nurse, and we're 8 years apart in age. And so I was this very young single mom. He was extremely successful and very respected at work, and he owned this home on the beach. And it was almost like he kind of came in and saved me and my son, for lack of a better word. And I don't mean that in a negative way towards him, but it was this dynamic of him really coming in and me no longer feeling like a single mom. And he was almost like above me. That's my own feelings. Not that he said anything like that, but I felt very lucky to be with someone like him whenever I kind of felt like, as a young single mom, no one would really want me. And after all of this, the dynamic really, really changed. And I don't really know if that's anyone's fault, but I think it's very hard to go from that dynamic to me having people literally stop me on the streets all the time and try to talk to me and take pictures with me and all of that. It's very different.
I heard you talking about that day that you feel like kind of, for lack of a better word on this podcast, put the nail in the coffin
Yeah.
of your marriage. You know, the marriage broke apart. You went through a period of depression,
Mm-hmm.
losing weight. I heard you said you had no money
Yeah.
and you were crying daily. And this is all after you have a book deal and are being interviewed by the New York Times. So back to you saying that you were giving freely. Was there any point in this journey when you were thinking, well, maybe for my own sanity or for my own health, mentally and physically, I should be monetizing this more and not just giving freely?
You know, not really. I really did take a step away from social media. I had certain obligations like the book tour and things like that, but I felt like I was not in a place where I could discuss things in my personal life without having questions and just, trolls, just mean people. And I felt like I couldn't handle that at the time. So I went from posting at least 3 times a week, maybe daily, to posting once a month. I think there was a time period where I didn't post for 3 months and I just disappeared.
Mm.
And that's how I handled it. Thankfully, the book was a success. And I don't know if people know how book royalties work, but you don't normally get paid until like a year later after your book releases, is usually your first paycheck. I definitely had some of the creator fund money coming in and stuff like that I was very grateful for. And YouTube definitely helped sustain me since videos can kind of be a little bit more evergreen on there. But it was a very stressful time for sure.
And it seems like the drama surrounding, whatever was happening in your married life has continued to follow you, unfortunately, on social media.
Yeah.
And there's this whole new situation. We're going to let our listeners do their own digging if they want. However, we all know that digging around on TikTok is often not wise because you're getting information from random people who are making videos for views, maybe making things up. And I feel like as long as you're here on the mic and have a platform to say whatever you want to say about that situation, is there anything that you would want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really mind talking about it too much. It's been crazy, and it's just one of those situations where you just kind of like go with the flow and try to go on. But
Do you want to give like a top line background?
yeah, so my husband and I separated a year and a half ago. He met someone in December, and so it was kind of like this thing of like, okay, we're gonna start dating. That's fine. Last December, and so I met Brett in March of a year ago. He had a daughter, and he had told me that it was like this really kind of unconventional situation where he had agreed to get someone pregnant as like kind of a sperm donor situation, but that he wouldn't have to be involved. And then his parents found out after she was pregnant and basically were like, you need to be involved. No, absolutely not. You're not doing that. Baby's not going to grow up without a dad. No. And so he was like, okay, I guess I'll be involved. And so he shows up to the birth and he decides that he's going to be a parent. And he was like, you know what? It's weird. Not what I planned for, but like, it's great. I love her.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is with a woman who he had like a one night fling with.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of TikTok gets really confused. So they had a one night stand in the past.
Right.
And then she was like hanging out. I'm not going to slander her. She's hanging out with a lot of his friends. So she was kind of still around, but he wasn't doing anything. And then she approached him about the sperm donor situation, and they agreed and they hung out for a few weeks. And a lot of people have said, oh, well, there's like pictures of them together. And so it wasn't just a one night stand. And I'm like, y'all, this isn't The Handmaid's Tale. How do y'all think she got pregnant? Like, I don't know how to explain this to y'all, but I don't want to have to like say that. But like, yes, they hung out. Like, how do y'all think a baby is made? I don't know how else to say it. So that happens. And I had known that the whole time. And there were parts of me that were kind of like, is that true? I don't know if that's true. Do I trust men? And then there was a situation that my boyfriend had posted about while we were together in June, where she had gone on and said that he was a deadbeat. And
Does she have a social media following?
so she posted to her Facebook, but I'm pretty sure she has like 5,000 Facebook friends.
Oh,
And she
okay.
had made it with like the little public. So like I wasn't friends with her. I could see it.
Mhm.
I mean, people were sending it to me kind of thing. And so Brett's grandmother had like commented on it and was like, okay, yeah, I hear you. But like this was kind of always a thing. Like you never wanted him to be involved. And like, this is why you should have children with someone you date. And I saw that and I was like, oh, okay. Well, she never denied it either when she responded. So I'm like, okay, I guess they never did date. So I like started to believe him and understand after that. It's just a weird situation. Go through it. She doesn't want to get to know me. I'm like, I want to be friends with her. She wants nothing to do with me. And I'm just like, okay, whatever kind of thing. And, maybe she'll come around eventually. And she's like really being really mean to him. And I'm seeing all these texts and they're like gearing up for court again. And there was a situation where I had basically at one point overheard that the baby was born on its due date. And as a nurse, I know that I can look up a conception window then. So I did it like late at night one night. Curiosity got the best of me. And then went to his Facebook and was like, he was in California at that time. That's weird. So I brought it up to him.
Coming in with the facts. Hadley going to the science. I love this.
And so I brought it up to him and was like, but like if you want to do nothing about it, I don't care. And so he was like, no, I think that I need to know. And so he ordered a DNA test. He did it. And between him actually he sent it off and then getting the results, it's like 2 days. I went and talked to him and was like, hey, I want to have a talk right now because if this baby isn't yours, like we met as two single parents. And I actually said I was only going to date another single parent because I need someone to understand like co-parenting and like the difficulties of that and like sometimes having to put your kids first. And so I said, I'm only going to date another single parent. So I was like, what does this mean for us? Like, are you going to even want to date me if it comes back that you're not a dad? And I was like, I want to have this conversation now because if it comes back and you're not the dad, that's not going to be the time for me to be like, okay, I know you're going through something like super life shattering, but like, let's talk about us kind of thing.
Right. Like preemptively, let's discuss.
Yeah. Are you going to want to move? I can't move, that kind of thing. And, he thought about it and then he was like, no, like that, it doesn't change how I feel about you. You're not like some consolation prize because I'm a parent. And I was like, okay. And he's like, but babe, like this child is mine. Like 99% sure it's mine. And I'm like, okay. So I remember the test came back and it said 0% chance. And I mean, it was incredibly shocking. It was incredibly upsetting. He called his parents. It was insane.
How old
And
is this child now?
she's 3.
Oh, wow. So
She was 2 at the time.
It's not even like it's a newborn baby. I mean,
Right.
happy for your sake, it's not a newborn baby, but
Right.
a 3-year-old, I mean, you're already, whether or not you're even the biological father at that point, it's like if you've been the father figure, then that's hard to untangle.
Yeah, it was. And he had decisions to make because in our state, you only have, I think it's 60 or 90 days from finding that out to file different motions. And so he had to really think about it. And it's really hard to watch someone you love grieve something like that and have to work through the emotions of like, wow, I've been lied to for this long. And I feel like I watched him grieve completely. And I told him, I said, if you want to never say anything, like I'll take it to my grave. Like your parents will too. Like we can just pretend like we never saw this. And like whatever you want to do is totally fine with me. He really thought about it and he made his decision that he felt like it was best to cut ties now before she could remember all of us. And that he wanted to go ahead and make his legal filings. And I said, whatever your decision is, like I will support that 100%. It's not my decision to make at all. And so he did. He made the filings and she had, of course, gone online. And what a lot of people didn't know was that she had even been, after she found out that he had filed this and had the DNA test and stuff, she had even been calling a lot of our family and friends, spinning more lies. he was like, okay, I need to set the record straight. Like, I've stayed quiet for 3 years now while she's kind of slandered my name and called me a deadbeat and done all of this. And like, I need to say my piece and then I'll be done. And he had like, 100 TikTok followers, like 500 Facebook friends, and like a few thousand on Instagram. He didn't mention me. He just told his story. And he felt like he wanted to tell his story and finally be heard. And it went insanely viral. And it was very stressful. Her cousin came online and just started making up all of these lies. And for whatever reason, she decided that I was her target. And she decided to start telling people that I tampered with the DNA test. And Maria, that's the woman, she never liked me because I'm a felon and I lost custody of my kids. I mean, I had people making videos about me saying that. She said that my 12-year-old was disabled. I had my 12-year-old calling me, crying, asking why people were saying he was disabled.
Oh my
I'm just
gosh.
was like, what in the world? And they were all lies, all of them. And I was like, this is just crazy. And so he's like, okay, well, I'm going to make a response video. Like, I'm going to clear all this up. And he gets served with a gag order. He now can't talk, and they made him remove his video. And I think a lot of people made a lot of assumptions based on that. And so I ended up making my own response video, just saying, like, I'm just going to clear up the stuff about me. I'm not a felon, didn't lose custody of my kids, none of that. But it was, again, another really hard time. It was hard on us. It was hard on everyone, for all of that to be dissected in that way.
Wow, truly what a whirlwind.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for opening up and sharing all that. Let's hope that they don't reach out to the real stuff and make us take this whole podcast down.
No, they won't. No.
But, it just gets me thinking about, in general, if this was just a little story in a little small town with Brett and Maria, and it was just their story, they're posting it on their Facebook to their 500 followers or 1,000 friends or whatever, and then it stays kind of contained, or it goes viral and it's out there, that is what it is. But it's almost like once there's a way in that involves a person who's blown up on social media, someone who's got all this success, a lot of eyeballs, it's like, let's take her down.
Yeah.
And it just turns into almost like a witch hunt.
Yeah.
People love to see a good downfall.
They do.
Unfortunately. And in your case, I think people loved to see this uprising as well, because you are such a sweet, lovely soul who has such a loving, caring, nurturing job. And it's almost like you're this underdog on the way up, this sweet, loving nurse who does literally the Lord's work for old, dying people and shares it on TikTok. And here you are on your rise and everyone's supporting you. And then, she's gotten too far. She's gotten too much success.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack on this and take her down. And that's how this whole story strikes me. I mean, I was trying to follow along with the drama of what was going on prior to this interview, so I would, be well versed in what was going on. And it's all just so messy and crazy. And I really do appreciate you opening up and telling us a story, from your perspective and telling us what has been going on. But I'm more curious in you as a human who's behind all of this. And I saw a recent video you posted. It sounded like you are going through a lot of internal sadness over negative comments and the way the internet has turned and some of the things you're reading about yourself. And I have noticed, as you said, that you've scaled back posting. I was scrolling through your TikTok. I wasn't even that far back. I was maybe like 10 videos back, and it was already from last year. So it seems like you haven't posted a lot. So how are you doing? How are you feeling being in the spotlight like this and having people try to take you down? It's not something that the average person goes through.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that it's definitely hard with that. But on the same hand, I'm actually very happy in my relationship, and I'm still in therapy. And I actually think that a lot of the not posting comes from actually just kind of wanting to protect my happiness. And I'm like, okay, well, like, I wake up and I'm happy and I'm in this happy, actually healthy relationship for once in my life. And my kids are happy and I'm doing really well. And so then it's like, whenever I go to post, I'm like, but that could ruin my happiness. And so it almost kind of scares me, like I talked about in that video, where I'm like, well, I would love to like open my DMs and respond, because I know that 90% of them will be positive, but that 10% who are telling me, to go kill myself or my boyfriend's a terrible person, or I hope that y'all break up, it's like upsetting enough that I'm just like, I don't really want to like even have it in my life at all. It's this hard thing because I'm like, I know that my videos help people. I know that I am able to help people whenever I do post. 9 times out of 10, the positive is there over the negative, but it's also, I do want to protect my own happiness.
Do you wish that you had never gotten famous?
No, I don't wish that. I think that it's done a lot of good for a lot of people, and me as well. I mean, it's allowed me to leave my marriage. It gave me a lot of confidence to be able to do so, and people were extremely supportive whenever I did announce it. And I think it's given me a lot of opportunities that I'm very grateful for. But at the same time, it does come with challenges that I feel like a lot of creators do try to talk about, or a lot of people try to talk about, that I think that you're just kind of expected to just kind of grin and bear it kind of thing. That's hard for me.
So after you go through whatever court cases you have coming up in connection to all the drama across the board,
Yeah.
do you plan on returning to social media, and are you going to really lean into whatever's happening with the TV show? Also, what's the status of the show, and
Yeah.
what's coming up next?
Yeah, I always kind of want to post more. I guess it's this pull between like, I was like, oh, well, I could just post and not read the comments. But then I always know that there's people there that I've never been like that. And the reason that I did become successful is because I did always reply to comments. And I never wanted to be that creator who was like ignoring people or just having people talk at me instead of me replying to them. And I never wanted to be that type of person, which is kind of what is this like pull internally for me. But I do want to post again. As far as the TV show, I have a producer. I love her. And NBC Universal is who my TV show's with. They've hired a writer who I think is incredible, and she's currently writing.
Can you explain, is this show like a drama, or is it you?
So I'm not in it. It's scripted. It's actors and actresses, and it's based on my book. So there'll be someone playing me.
Got it. Okay. And
Yeah.
is it like scenes from hospice care?
Yeah, so I'm an executive producer on it. So they can call me, they can Zoom with me, and they can be like, okay, we think that something like this would go well here. Like, tell us about a time that you had something like that happen. And so there'll definitely be things in it that weren't part of the book or you've never seen on social media, because whenever they've done that in the past, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that patient.
I'm excited for that. I can't wait for that. And we will also link the book for people down in the show notes. And listen, I am on social media in a very different capacity from you, just in terms of what I share. And so, I don't want this part to sound like, I know you didn't even ask for my advice with the negative comments, but
Yeah.
I've also been on the receiving end of plenty of negativity in my time as a content creator. And it's unfortunately one of those scenarios where when you put yourself out there and experience, not only, I don't want to say like when you experience success, it comes, but it's especially when you go viral and when you get in front of people who don't know your story and didn't follow you before and don't feel any connection to you and did not hit that follow button, and then they see your content, it unfortunately just comes with the territory there. And also, I haven't received it around the same types of issues that you're dealing with drama that has to do with like my significant others or my children, or things that are just, it just seems too close for comfort and so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I do hope that you can apply the lens of some of the learnings that you get from your patients to what is happening here, because at the end of the day, you know who you are, you know what you're showing up for and what your goal is, and you know what's true about you. At the end of your life, that is what is going to matter. And, you of all people know how fleeting life is.
Yeah.
And how our lives end, and we don't want to spend our lives sucked up in these negative spirals over people that don't even know us.
Yeah.
So I hope that you are able to apply that lens to the situation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely helpful. It's definitely difficult whenever you have people. I think people trying to tell you who you are, and then I think whenever you reply and you're like, "But that's not who I am," and they're like, "No, I'm telling you who you are," and I'm like, "Okay."
It's almost a lose-lose
Yeah.
engaging and talking back like that, because you know who you are and
Yeah.
you know who Brett is and Brett knows who he is. And really, at the end of the day, I hope that you can silence some of the noise and just move forward with your beautiful life. And you seem like a
Thank you.
lovely person, and I'm really rooting for you with everything you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. This was fascinating, and I know people are just going to love hearing all of these insightful takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Real Stuff podcast. If you're liking the show, please head over to Apple or Spotify and leave the show a written review. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down below and join in the conversation. And if you're feeling called to be a guest on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your attention with us, and we will see you next time on the Real Stuff podcast.
Please note that this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services. Individuals on the show may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to in this episode.